Hello, welcome back. We are in my sort of craft area because the lighting is just beautiful. But today we are going to be talking about some nonfiction book recs specifically about public health. So I graduated with my master's in public health in March of 2020, which was an absolutely wild time to be graduating into that field. And even though I don't work in that field currently due to a lot of different reasons, I was living overseas at the time. It was hard to find a job. I was having kids. It was the COVID-19 pandemic. And then I got a really great job with great benefits that could support my family that is like mildly tangentially connected to public health. And so I accepted that position and it's been going really great and really fits well with our lifestyle here now that we're back in the States. And so it is an aspiration and a goal and a dream of mine to eventually transition into public health. But obviously right now, is not a great time to be trying to get into that field. So while I'm not making money or pursuing this interest in a professional capacity, it is something I'm still extremely interested and passionate about. And so let's talk about some books about this topic. So I cannot talk about this topic without talking about The Hot Zone by Richard Preston. This was one of the first public health sort of like novelizations, short books that I'd ever read. And I do credit it with sort of like sparking my interest in this field, even though this is not scientifically accurate. He takes a lot of leaps when it comes to the dramatization of Ebola as an illness and the way that it can spread. And then when it comes to biosafety and sort of the ways that labs operate, he takes a lot of liberties. This is characterized, I think, as a nonfiction thriller. So it's based in reality. It uses real facts, but it takes a lot of liberties to create sort of a intense, almost like zombie movie feeling in the book. And so it's really interesting. I think they made a movie about it. And like I said, it's kind of a fun one to like get me into it. And I understand why my professor picked this as like the very first one for us to read because it was a freshman seminar. I think she wanted to like grip all of our attention, but it's not super accurate. And if you read it and it freaks you out, do some independent research, and I think the realities of it will put you a little bit more at ease. But I had to mention it because it's kind of where this whole journey started. The next book I have to talk about is The Ghost Map by Steve Johnson. Stephen Johnson. It is about Jon Snow, this guy, not this guy. He was a physician in London in the 1800s, and he was studying the 1854 cholera outbreak in London. And it is one of the earliest examples of graphical data analysis being created and used to track an outbreak. And due to the map that he created of the cholera outbreak, he was able to prove that cholera was a waterborne disease, not an airborne disease. And he was able to trace it back to one specific water pump in the neighborhood that was making everyone sick. And so it was really fascinating. It's really historically important. I think he's kind of called the like father of epidemiology now because of that work. And it's just a really accessible and fun book to read. It doesn't read very textbooky. It's not super intense, and I think if you're interested in this type of book, this one is a really great one to go to. It's also not super long, so I would definitely highly recommend that one. Another one that I still think about constantly that I read for my master's program was The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. This chronicles the story of a woman named Henrietta who went in for pain in her abdomen and during her exam, a massive tumor was discovered on her cervix, and the doctors took a sample of that tumor, of her cervical cancer, and they didn't tell her they were taking a sample, and if I'm remembering correctly, they didn't even tell her that she had cervical cancer. They just sent her on her way, and then that cell sample was used to create the first immortal human cell line that we have in medical history. And so for me, while yes, that is medically notable that we did that we achieved that, this book is so much more about the historic brutalization and abuse of Black women's bodies in the names of furthering medical research, particularly gynecological research. And so it's just a very, very impactful read. It spends a lot of time telling you about Henrietta and her family and sort of their experience fighting for justice for Henrietta throughout the years, and I believe they made a mini series about it, and so at some point I'll check that out. But it's just a really, really important story, and I think it really perfectly encapsulates the importance of public health, because when you look at medicine and like being a doctor, studying diseases and things like that, you're looking at just the disease. You're looking at just the science, whereas public health takes that and also marries it with the human impact. And so this is a perfect example of the importance of public health and the ways in which our society mistreats people in pursuit of medical knowledge. Yeah, really good. Highly recommend. Then another one to just sort of get you right in the gut is Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. This is all about end-of-life care and how we take care of humans as they die, and especially in America, the way that it's like very overly medicalized, and just sort of makes some calls for humanity and empathy in end-of-life care and the importance of valuing human safety, comfort, and agency as someone dies. Very, very important, and I think often overlooked. It's a field that's really hard to get funding for. It's hard to get people to work in long-term care facility homes because it's really grueling and difficult work, and especially if they're not being paid well. It's a really sad part of our society that's often overlooked. So I think that's a really important topic. Another one that I read in my undergrad, a lot of these were from my undergrad just because that's where my interest really started, and that's where a lot of this sort of began. But another one was Wisdom of Horrors by Elizabeth Pisani. This is looking at the HIV/AIDS epidemic, and it challenges the idea that sex workers are sort of the number one drivers of disease for HIV/AIDS, looks at all the different ways and risk factors that HIV/AIDS is spread. And yes, sometimes it is through sex work, but there's a lot of different factors at play. And so it just advocates for a more empathetic look at this, this profession and these people, and sort of provides more empathy, especially because, it is predominantly women, and so that's a very complicated intersection of identities and prejudices when we're looking at sex work. But yeah, just really, really interesting, and a good look at different community-based approaches and recommendations for addressing this epidemic in different places. So really like that one. And then this last one is Everything is Tuberculosis by John Green. This is a more recent read, came out this year. It's really short, and it is what it says. It's Everything is Tuberculosis, talks about all the ways in which tuberculosis has influenced modern society in really interesting and surprising ways. The only thing I wish is I wanted a little bit more of an emotional impact from this. I wanted a little bit more of a call to action, and some of that characteristic John Green notes on humanity type writing, but it was still really good and I enjoyed it. And I think that if you're looking to get into this type of writing, this is a really accessible place to begin because it's not super sciencey, and so you can get into it without having to know a lot of background information about tuberculosis as a disease. Then I wanted to throw this one in. This is Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. The reason I want to include this is because in order to be successful, I think in medicine overall, but especially in public health, you have to be educated on social determinants of health. So social determinants of health are all the different ways in which society affects your individual health. So things like race, where you were born, where you work, where you are if you're able to access food in your community, all of these different things that come together to build a picture of what your health looks like. And that includes things like systemic racism and the criminal justice system in America. Because if you are more likely to get arrested, if you're more likely to be profiled, then you are more likely to end up in jail. And jails and prisons are notoriously prone to outbreaks and disease. And then obviously further down the line, if you are arrested for a capital offense, you might even be killed. And that's sort of the end all be all of your health journey, is to no longer be on this planet. And I think Bryan Stevenson just does an incredible job at asking the question of why do we have the right to take someone's life in an official capacity, and why is it that we get it wrong so many times. He takes us through a couple specific stories and cases that are just absolutely heartbreaking. And I just admire Bryan Stevenson so much as a human. He's doing incredible work, and I think that everyone should read this book. So go read it. Okay, now, books on my radar. The The first one, I just picked this up from the library. This is And the Band Played On by Randy Schultz. This talks about the AIDS crisis in America in the 80s. And I think this is super important for a lot of different reasons, but the biggest one that comes to mind, especially in Pride Month, is the fact that due to the AIDS crisis, we lost so many queer elders in the queer community, and the ripple effect that that has today in the ways that we have lost a historical perspective. We've lost this longevity of being able to see queer adults and queer old people. Obviously, we still have them. They're not all gone, but a significant portion of people died in the 80s. And so it's just a really important look at not only AIDS as a disease, but the social implications of the crisis and how it was handled. And it's a long one, but I'm really looking forward to it, and I will report back once I finish it, although I don't know if that will be anytime soon, because like I said, it's kind of long. I didn't know it was going to be this long. Another one on my radar is Empire of Pain by Patrick Radden Keefe. This is about the Sackler dynasty and their hand in the fentanyl and heroin epidemic. Really interesting. I'm fascinated by pharmaceutical companies and the ways in which rich people in America have so deeply affected health in America because of their corporate greed. So really interested in looking at that one. The next one is The Premonition by Michael Lewis. This is about COVID-19. So far, I've not read any nonfiction books about the COVID-19 epidemic. It was a little too fresh there for a while at the beginning, and also there wasn't a lot in the first year or two, especially, that I felt should have been written yet, because there wasn't a lot of data out. I was kind of waiting to see what came out, and wasn't just sort of this initial, like, what felt like from some people a bit of a cash grab when books were being published, like in 2020 especially. So interested to be checking that one out. Then I want to read Fevers, Feuds, and Diamonds by Paul Farmer. This is about Ebola, and I think Ebola is a really fascinating virus, and this sparked the interest in that disease. And so, but it's not, like I said, not super accurate. And so, yeah, I want to read some more about Ebola. And then another one that is, in my opinion, looks like sort of the quintessential social determinants book is Weathering by Arlene T. Geronimus, looking at the intersection of health and social justice and the way that social justice issues have deeply affected marginalized communities and their health in America. It looks really interesting, and I'm really excited to pick that one up. And then the last one has been on my radar for quite some time. One of my favorite professors in my undergrad recommended this one. This is Spillover by David Quammen. This is all about spillover, which is the event in which a disease goes from being in animals to being in humans. So really fascinating. I think it can be a little scary to read, and so, a lot of these books are going to be difficult to read if you have any sort of like health anxiety, especially. I know that that's really rampant after COVID-19, but they're still really interesting topics and still things to be aware of. But the biggest thing I think to keep in mind when you're reading any of these types of books that are written for a commercial audience, are written not for scientists, is they're always going to have some emotional call. They're going to have some sort of sensationalism. Even if it's slight, there's going to be a little bit of dramatization, because it's how you keep readers interested. It's how you sell books. It's how you get your thought across. But the biggest thing to know is you still have the power, once you read a book like this, to go and do a little bit of research yourself and hopefully put your mind at ease when you read something scary, or you feel like things are being packaged and presented in a way that makes you feel like all of a sudden everything is going to end, and we're going to have another pandemic on our hands. All of these things I think are valid concerns, but just remember that there is a certain amount of dramatization when you're writing these types of novels that are intended to be read by non-scientists. And so these are all just parts of a whole in educating yourself in these types of topics, and a lot of them are really interesting. And so I would love to hear if any of you guys have any recommendations for me. This isn't a comprehensive list by any means. These are just sort of the first ones that I thought of when I thought of my public health reading journey, and I'm sure there'll be more that I think of after I post this. But yeah, let me know if you like this type of content. I'm happy to talk about it more, about my experience in grad school and all of that. But for now, I will catch you in the next one. So bye guys, have a good one.